Good morning. How are you this beautiful morning in beautiful Brisbane, Australia? It's actually cooled down a smidge overnight, so I'm so grateful. And how are you where the weather is, especially if you're in the Northern Hemisphere where it's freezing cold, like colder than normal? Oh my goodness, I don't know how you do it. So today I want you to go and grab your pen, paper, hopefully you've got your coffee already, and we're going to look at, the difference between anxiety and depression triggers. Now, at the end of this, and once the video's up on Facebook Live, I'm going to post a full article from Harvard about depression, and it will include all the information for people who are interested in the ins and outs of the biological and neurological triggers. So they will be there in all the ins and outs that you'll need. I can't go into every in and out, obviously, in the time that we've got. And also, I'm not here to be a scientist or a doctor. But I personally found the information invaluable. Now, I want you to be aware that whilst the science isn't complete yet about our brain and all its ins and outs and interactions, they have made vast inroads with bucket loads of information, greater than when things like antidepressants first came out, and so much more. Okay? Good morning, Christine. And so what you'll be able to do is look at, in a very healthy manner, the ins and outs of what's happening in each part of the brain for depression. And it is a bit different to anxiety. But what I want to look at today is, what does that mean for us? How can we use the information in order to recognise when the difference between when we've been triggered in anxiety and when we've been triggered into depression, okay? And there is a difference, which I've just worked out, okay? Literally this weekend, okay? And with the information, I won't have time today, but tomorrow what I'm going to go into is how to manage it in different ways. But today I want to give you the information around how to observe the difference in your life and what it can mean, the differences, etc., etc. And so if you haven't got your coffee, you might need it. But what I want you to focus on as you listen today is where you can see this happening in your day-to-day life. And it may not be right now, but if you write the information down, then you're going to have the information for your therapist or your trauma coach, and you're going to be able to discuss it with them, okay, and build strategies around it and gain a deeper emotional understanding as well. So how did I come about this information? Well, the last 2 weeks of my life have been a challenge. Now, they're not a challenge from the perspective that I felt good in me, I was getting on with the things that I needed to do. How's the best way to phrase that? I was knowing and aware of what I wanted to do and what I needed to do in my work, in my studies, in day-to-day life, okay? But Saturday night at 3:30 a.m. in the morning, I went, oh, for goodness sake, what's going on? Because I don't sit up and stay awake till 3:30 a.m. in the morning anymore. And what I began to see is the pattern over the last couple of weeks was that increasingly I was staying awake longer and longer at night. I was needing to stop my work or even if I didn't think I did, I'd stop my work, have lunch, next thing you know I'm asleep. And it's been like, why? Now initially the symptoms pointed to a sinus infection, which is normal for me this time of year, a dry sinus infection. So I've had acupuncture, I've got the antibiotics, and so on and so on. And then what was happening too is I could see with my work that I kept delaying doing the things that I needed to do. So think about, if one of the questions could be, where am I delaying things that I need to do? Another thing that I found that I was doing was with my thoughts. I was believing that things were going to take longer than they would. So it felt like, oh, I just haven't got the energy to do that because it's going to take forever to do it. And I really want to get on and do something else. Okay? And I began to say, hang on a sec, I love doing that, and I love doing my work, and I love putting everything together. Let's get up and do it. So I was able to see what I needed to do, but the thoughts around it were, oh, this just doesn't feel good, I haven't got the energy, I don't want to do it, blah, blah, blah. So I was also able to challenge what was going on, but I didn't know or understand what was really going on and why, the later bedtimes, not going to sleep, and all the other things that I've talked about were happening, okay? And this can translate in our day-to-day life to, I'm not getting housework done, so I'm not getting the dishes done, or I'm not taking good self-care of myself. And it's not that I'm choosing not to take self-care, it's that I completely forget that I have to do it, okay? So Saturday night at 3 a.m, when I began to examine all of this, I sat back and I went, as you do at 3:30 a.m. in the morning, and went, I've been triggered and I haven't realised it. And I went, well, what's the next question? Our questions are a good thing to ask ourselves. So this feels like I'm triggered because I've lost the ability to focus for extended periods of time, okay? So I went, obviously I was triggered because my prefrontal cortex is offline. I'm feeling emotional, and it keeps going on, and I'm starting to stop doing things that I love, like going to gym most days, more often than not. And I'm not getting the things done that are usually so easy for me. So there are 3 really good points in order to be able to examine when you've been triggered, and it's triggered depression instead of triggering the anxiety. Now, just let me wet my mouth. Coffee. We need coffee. So then I began to think, well, there has to be a difference within the brain of what happens between when we get triggered for anxiety and when we get triggered and it creates depression. There has got to be a difference. Okay? So then I went and researched about what's happening in our brain with the neurobiology and everything else that goes on. What happens with our physical response. And like I said, I'll post the article down below. Okay, the alarm stopped. Now, there are similarities of what happens when we're triggered with anxiety and with depression, but there are differences as well. Sorry, I thought my phone was turned off. So what we need to look at with when we're triggered in depression is the cells in our brain, so not only the inside of the cells, but the outside of the cells and the nerves and the connections and how they communicate. And there's a big word called neurogenesis too, which means how our cells regenerate, what's happening, and also what comes into this too is our genetics, okay? what's happened with us genetically, so what's been passed down. And I'll talk about this more in another, actually, I just wanted to show you something. I've got it here. I've moved it, wouldn't you know it? So with attachment theory, no, I didn't move it. Okay. So what we need to do is look at the emotional events in not just our lives, but in the lives and the relationships of the people that have gone before us. In that way, we can gain a greater understanding of what's happened for us genetically. Okay? So when I look back genetically, on my mother's side, which is this side, so my great-grandmother had 4 daughters, and whilst her husband was away working, so he was a drover, so a guy who used to go off days at a time and, bring the cattle all in. Okay? While he was away, she abandoned her 4 daughters. She left the farm. Okay? Can you imagine what that would do to 4 girls in the middle of the country with no one and nothing else around? Okay? Then my grandmother, emotionally, she abandoned her first daughter. I don't know why or how. She favoured her second daughter, and they had a third daughter as well. But the first daughter was my mother. Now this all impacted my mother to the point where there was a lack of attachment within her, and because she felt like the abandoned daughter, pardon me, and I actually had a physical representation of that, because my mother didn't tell me this until she was just, she died about 6 weeks later. And so she didn't tell me of everything that she'd held on to from childhood or the events that had happened. She just continually showed me what a strong woman was like. And there's more to it. But my mum carried bitterness towards her mother in her and died of breast cancer. So there were attachment issues between my mother and I, not because either of us wanted it, but genetically it's been handed down, okay? I won't go into the paternal side, but let's just say it's there on both sides, the emotional abandonment, etc., etc. So all of that impacts our neurology and our biology and our physiology, etc., etc. And good morning, William. No, you're right. It's not a good feeling, but it's something that as adults we can work through in recovery. Okay, so what I discovered was when I read the article, the difference between anxiety, so when we're triggered and our brain produces anxiety, and when our brain is triggered and we get depression, is that there's stress involved with depression. Okay, now with anxiety, we'll get triggered in our amygdala by something that we have no idea about, okay, and it creates the feelings of I'm not safe. So we have to learn to, get grounded, center ourselves in I am safe, and become aware that our brain believes that whatever's happening is now unmanageable, okay? Whereas we've got to train ourselves to understand and believe that we've been triggered, but whatever's happening, we can manage it, all right? Now, with depression, the cortisol levels rise and stay high. And the trigger then is from a stress, and we'll feel this emotionally at a heart level, whatever the stress is. How can I explain it? At a heart level is something to do with we're feeling that part of our life, in our day-to-day life, but more so in our future, is not manageable. So there's fear, there's stress, and we don't know what we're going to do about this situation. Now, the only way I came to understand that was after I'd read the article, I looked back over the last 2 weeks and I could identify the exact moment where I felt that things were going to be, I didn't know what to do and things were going to be unmanageable. I can literally see the moment because I could feel the moment where I went, oh my goodness. I could see that a whole lot of things were ending in my life at the moment. Not a bad thing, not in a bad way. And all of a sudden I was triggered into, well, I don't know what to do, that's stressful, what's going to happen after that? And because I'm me and I know who I am, I actually put it to one side and said, I don't need to worry about it. The difference was my brain was triggered in that exact moment. It felt overwhelmed. And the cortisol response, the levels rose and stayed high. Hence why all the things that I talked about in the beginning continued to increase and go further and further downhill. Because remember, when we're triggered, everything leaves the brain and puts us into fight or flight mode. Our adrenaline's in our extreme reaches and we're getting ready for a battle. So we have no access to our prefrontal cortex, which is order, which is our ability to focus, and so much more, coordination, and it's all our fine motor skills. So when we leave the trigger unaddressed, we continue, it's like your health going increasingly downhill, okay? So when we go increasingly downhill, we have to be the ones that look back and go, hang on, everything was okay for a while, and then I've gone downhill again. Now, the catch for me was, I still felt really good in myself, okay? And all the physical, so the brain and body, were going downhill. But in myself, I was still excited for the future. I was still planning. I was still putting practices into place. And this is why I missed when my brain went offline, because I still kept continuing to focus on where I'm going and where I'm headed in my business, in my day-to-day life. And it wasn't until yesterday when I went, oh my goodness, this is such a different trigger to the anxiety. So remember, when we get triggered into anxiety, we literally know because we're having a panic attack, okay? We can't breathe, there's a shortness of breath, and we break out into a sweat. Our vision is disorientated, and so much more. And we're left in that moment to deal with it. So with the depression, it's rather insidious how it creeps in, and we continue to go downhill, and until we stop and ask the question and say, hey, everything was doing okay, why are all my normal habits getting out of whack? That we can sit back and go, hey, was I triggered into depression, not anxiety? Okay? Now, I want to be quite clear. This is not our fault. This all comes from how our brain developed. It comes from how we weren't parented in a healthy manner. We weren't parented in a manner that built skills into our life so that we automatically know, well, hey, that's okay. I can have that internal stress and it's all going to be manageable. I know how to manage this. And see, for me at this point, I know how to manage, but it's still triggered. All the chemistry in my brain went offline, okay? And that was nothing. I couldn't do anything about that at all because of how our brain developed in childhood. But what I can do is recognise it a lot quicker. So my aim is, if that happens again, I can recognise it, only a week in instead of 2 weeks. Or I can recognise when I feel in my heart that things are unmanageable. Okay? Now, I know this can be a lot to take in because we have to go and have the experience in our day-to-day life of the difference. So what I want you to be able to do from today's information is say, okay, I've been triggered, my brain's gone offline. Now our brain going offline is literally when all the chemistry leaves and it all goes to our extremes and we're ready for fight and flight. We're having a panic attack. You can't avoid not knowing. It happens and it's hard work. The second thing is we want to be able to observe when we get triggered into depression by being able to observe when our brain goes offline. It's a lot more subtle, and we are going to have to be aware increasingly as each day, our whole patterns of the day and what we do and what we're capable of doing each day goes offline and we're doing less. Okay, that's when we've got to sit down and do self-reflection and go, was I triggered? Now tomorrow I want to be able to bring to you a whole different set of what we can actually do to get our brain back online when we've been triggered into depression. Okay, now today, even though I couldn't get to sleep as early as I wanted last night, I was still able to get to sleep way earlier than 3:30 a.m. in the morning. And I woke up this morning feeling so good internally because I've had this increased understanding and now I know it will all be manageable. Okay, remember our brains developed with the fear response. And so now as adults, it's up to us to recognise what's going on and retrain our brain by experiencing and putting into place different behaviours and different beliefs that life is manageable. So whilst we don't have control over when our brain decides it's a trigger, we do have absolute control in getting our brain back online eventually. And also we have control over putting into place systems and ways of living that are manageable. Okay, I hope this helps you understand the difference between an anxiety and a depression trigger. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them down below. I will come back. I'm just going to get this uploaded and head off to gym. And thank you for staying and watching. I really appreciate it. And remember, we're the turtles. We win the race. The hare didn't win. Going quick is no win. We win the race because we are the turtles. Okay, blessings and dreams, and I will see you again tomorrow morning. Bye for now.